Hmm. Welcome, everybody. Yay. So good to see all of you. Now, just a reminder that we have a Mudita weekend going on, a month-long retreat where people are now at the Mudita week and the Sunday sitting people. So it's a wonderful to have everybody here. Thank you.
Yeah, really good to see everybody.
You want to see everybody before we start? That's it's wonderful.
Actually, before we get started, we wanted to just make a little reminder announcement. We thought it would be good to just say it with a bigger group. Um, just that we try to kind of hold our Zoom space with a certain sense of kind of quietude and focus and kind of unity of concentration and attention. And we really love the way in which like that keeps getting expressed and stabilized. Um, and just a reminder to folks like kind of here and there to just remember that you are watching something, but you are also being watched. You are you are a participant in this experience, and that um, it matters. Right? You are helping support the container through your um, composure. And we understand that people are at home and this thing might happen or that thing might happen. Um, but it's just that sense of like if you are going to be moving around or driving, it's like just turn off your video, or having breakfast or texting or reading the news at the same time. It's just like know that you can see most people are not doing that and that we ask to help kind of contain the space in that way. Of course, usually what happens when you say something like that is the people who are doing nothing wrong feel like maybe they're the ones doing something wrong and
Right?
you'll shut your screen off
Please
because you
don't.
just don't really no need. It's more just that sense of like, oh, is everyone else having dinner while we're talking? Or like, is this a movie? Or is this a Dhamma hall that we're trying to kind of keep together in our collective way? Mhm. Is that a good way to start a mudita talk? So feel good about your goodness and all of the wonderful ways that you are supporting and that you feel supported by the community and by all of us. It is good. We want to protect it. Mhm. I was reading some material of the Abhidhamma, the kind of part of the Pali Canon that focuses on mm, it's often translated as kind of Buddhist psychology and more of the kind of mechanistic analysis of on a very refined and discrete levels, kind of what's happening, with sense contact and mind moments and consciousness and uh, uh all of the sort of mathematical complexity and compendiums of all that can happen and how it unfolds. Historically, it's kind of understood to be something that people elaborated, in the centuries after the Buddha's death. But in the tradition, there is the story and the um, belief, knowledge that actually the Buddha did actually give these sermons, that he explained all of this in detail, just not necessarily in the human realm, that he went up to the Deva realms and the Brahma realms, would give these long discourses on all of this detail, and it got recorded in that way. And of that sort of side of it, the more kind of mythological story side of it, which I hadn't remembered but when I was rereading it, the story was that he was in the Brahma realms and sitting under a coral tree as he gave this certain discourse and talk from that part of the canon. And I just was like, I had forgotten that this part of the story, that he was supposedly sitting under this tree. And just that sense of like what a beautiful image, of a certain kind of blossoms and flowers, this canopy, this natural setting and canopy where he's, giving a discourse to all these powerful beings, in these other realms. And that, of course, this is like a theme that we see throughout the suttas, throughout the tradition. Most people know the story is that he attained enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, the Bo tree, a type of banyan. He was supposedly born under a sal tree, and Lumbini died under a pair of sal trees, attained parinibbana under a pair of sal trees, technically. Mm. The famous story of remembering as a child seeing his, father and the workers in the field, that he was under the shade of the rose apple tree, under which he kind of got very calm and concentrated, and um, realized that through that memory of his childhood, this childhood experience of calm and concentration, as he had this memory during the time that he was really struggling and trying to force his awakening and liberation, that perhaps there was a softer, gentler approach to the path. And that it was through this memory of sitting as a child under the rose apple tree that led him to reconsider his current path and his way of practicing, so that he softened and allowed himself more food and took care of himself, and ultimately became fully enlightened. And so this like beautiful way in which so many of these important chapters of the Buddha's life happen under the shade of these different trees. And then I can't remember what I looked up about it, but I found this long list of different kinds of trees that all of the different Buddhas of the different eons had become enlightened under. So the last Buddha got enlightened under a different kind of tree, and the one before that, a different kind of tree. This idea through vast epochs and eons, something like, I can't remember, 44 different Buddhas, enlightened under 44 different trees. The next Buddha would become enlightened under a different tree. And I'm sure that within all of those, there are more stories of powerful things under other trees, and certainly just within this Buddha's lifetime and this dispensation, other important stories of things happening under different trees. And I was just like imagining the impact of that. What might that be like, right? Where to live in a time and in a place where every tree that you would encounter, you would know, oh, that was that was the tree that this Buddha got away enlightened under, or this is the tree where this other being got enlightened under, or this tree here. And it's like this idea that you would be just walking through the forest or walking through your village or town, and there would be this sense of radiance, right, of the recognition that's not just sort of symbolic, right? Uh, that under this tree, this Buddha was awakened, and under this tree, another was awakened. And that, what would it be like to just walk around your neighborhood like that, with that sense of inspiration and awakening happening all around us? Um, the intimacy of that and the relationship of these trees around us, not sort of the abstract period of time and trees from some other land, right? Depending on where you live. This is how beautiful it would be to just walk around with that sense of familiarity, with that sense of reverence, with that sense of sacredness, right? Of every tree being a tree of enlightenment. And that in some ways that is this call, right, of mudita, of that willingness and that understanding the goodness that is around us and has been around us and will be around us, that acknowledgement of the most beautiful, right, can happen under this tree or that tree or this bench or in this sidewalk, right? This sense that it's not some faraway place, and that we may not have those stories about the place that you're living or the place that you grew up, right? Some of us may not, and that is something that needs to get regenerated, right? For each of us, that sense that enlightenment isn't something that's so distant and foreign and outside of our direct experience, that it's like visceral and around us, and that the echoes of it are still reverberating, right? As we walk under the shade of this maple or aspen or fir tree of some kind or another. What is it like to just walk in beauty in that way? Such an important teaching, such an important practice, something that we can aspire to, and everyone who's been, practicing this weekend, understanding that is the call ultimately, right? That under this condition, under these conditions, this can happen. This has happened, right? And we share in that environment, that atmosphere of joy, of gladness, right? That sense of mudita as internal and external, right? This sense of like, wow, that under this tree and like this being got enlightened and this being got enlightened, and that the sense of inspiration in that, and the sharing of the joy in that, the recognition that we benefit from that, not that sense of where it could turn into, my not good enough or my distance from that or my unworthiness of that, right? It's the opposite of what's proposed and trying to be cultivated. How important that is as a practice, as a way of going through the world, not in denial of pain or hardship or challenges, dukkha at all, And in some ways, as I'll talk about, it's like actually it's through the acknowledgement and the understanding of how hard things are, how hard it is to get enlightened. And yet, wow, under every one of these trees, a different being has become enlightened, that it's possible. How hard it is to exist, how hard it is to simply survive the human realm for so many. And yet, yes, it's possible, right? Goodness exists, generosity exists, happiness exists, joy exists. It's that sort of progression of the heart, it's that balancing of the heart. Something so important in the sense of how one can lead one and the next in the Brahma Viharas, but also how they are mutually self-supportive, right? Mutually purifying, mutually generative. Michelle and I were taking a walk last week and um, came upon some cherry trees that are already blossoming here. Definitely early. It's always earlier in Hawaii than, in other places, but even for that, it's early. Mm. And somebody had these trees had gotten pretty wild over the years, and someone had come and done the work of trimming them, pruning them, and it's this amazing little area where there's all these volunteers who are helping take care of this not huge gardens, but it's, any small garden is a lot of work. But these lands where they're trying to bring back native trees and native plants, and it takes a lot of volunteer effort, You can't just create the garden. You have to, like, so much energy goes into maintaining it. So you always see volunteers doing this or that work. And so someone had done a very thorough job of pruning this cherry tree. And I got excited because, as a spoon carver and bowl carver, cherry wood is so lovely. It's really beautiful. Very kind of it's a hardwood, but it's like easy to work. Fruit trees in general, the wood is very kind of has a kind of creaminess to it, and often very beautiful coloring. And so I said, "Oh, great!" And it's not that common to come across cherry wood here. Um, and so I ended up gathering this huge log. This one big chunk of the tree had been cut, and um, almost more than I could carry. This big log of cherry wood, and got it into the car and uh, drove it home. And this what started as that sense of like, yeah, my own satisfaction and uh, happiness of having this wood to work with and being able to make spoons for people like I like to do. And um, but I also kind of soon realized that it was a lot of wood. And this has happened to me in the past where it's like, oh, I'll come across a fallen tree, or I'll come across something and I'll gather a lot of wood, and it's just too much. It's too much to work with. I can't produce that many spoons without injuring myself or letting all of my other life responsibilities fall to the wayside. And so I realized that it was an appropriate thing to um, really to offer a spoon carving class. It's something that I've done a few years in a row as a little fundraiser for my canoe paddling club out here, Outrigger Canoe Club. And I hadn't done one this year and wasn't sure if I would get to it. So I thought, oh, I have this beautiful log and this beautiful piece of wood, and I will make more work for myself by having to actually prep all of this wood and offer a class. And in part, there, of course, in part, I will say there is some aspect of generosity to that. But I also know that there is a very particular kind of joy that I get from other people learning how to carve, right? Spoons or bowls. We did a bowl carving class with yogis this fall. Um, and that there was that kind of what I would still say is a wholesome, I would propose that it's still a wholesome self-interest of mine to uh, have this experience because I have done this now several times, and it's like to watch so many of us have never had any training in that, right? We don't know how to use our hands to build something, to create something. We've never learned how to use tools, especially ones that we might feel like are dangerous. Um, and so many of us don't have a lot of confidence in that capacity to create something out of a piece of wood, something beautiful, something useful, something that you can give away or use. And so I have found over the last couple of years that by teaching people to carve spoons, there is just, it's so wonderful to see people at the end of the day and they have their spoon and they made it and they spent the day hanging out with everyone and talking story and getting little cuts and getting healed. I get to play nurse and all those things. Uh, there's like this sense of like just building goodness and joy, and that I get to experience that and feel a part of it, and can set things in motion to help feel that goodness, right, myself. Um, and of course, right, give other people that opportunity to do it. It's it's something so wonderful, and not just in the success of it, right? Not just in the final accomplishment, but in watching people struggle with things that I have struggled with, right? To know that it's like this looks like a club, and it's like, how does this turn into something that looks like this, And that sense of, being able to support, encourage, but that people need to do it on their own and figure it out ultimately, and to watch people get frustrated or make mistakes and um, get little cuts or things like that, um, but to see how much more rewarding that makes it, I mean, yes, you have people who are just good at it and they've whatever, they don't need help really. Um, and and yet the joy in the challenging moments too, Um, and I just feel like there's something important to convey about that because you can just imagine that, like, we're happy. If I'm happy, like someone learning how to make a spoon, it's like nothing compared to like watching people develop their practice, and get into their their meditation practice and flourish and come to insights and struggle with things. And it's like the beautiful struggles, the beautiful challenges. We know how scary it can be. We know how hard it can be, how daunting, how impossible it can feel. How much more important than like a spoon or something, There is this such joy that we have in this process and working with everyone, and this weekend of these little time with these little windows in which like we're trying to come together and practice these beautiful, precious, rare things in our hearts and minds. For those folks who are just coming for the Sunday sitting, this is not the Sunday sitting, right? This is today, this month, we're doing a month-long period of Brahma Vihara practice where we're having these intensive weekend retreats. And so people have come together, for this third weekend amidst their busy lives and all of the flood of that and trying to protect a little bit of time to cultivate this quality of appreciative joy, sympathetic joy. How amazing, how beautiful, how wonderful. And that recognition that it's like also the joy and the challenges. It's again, you start to see, oh, how does the metta lead to the karuna to the mudita to the upekkha, love to compassion, to joy, to equanimity. This powerful relationship between sorrow and happiness, painfulness and joy. And how much we need to understand that and long to understand, long to experience that, right? Understand it in the heart way, in the body way. I remember some years ago seeing this very elderly man and his kind of middle-aged son going into the ocean here. And you could just see it was very hard for this man to get into the water. The surf was not incredible, but it was strong enough, and he was very weak. He had a kind of a special kind of wheelchair that you could push on the sand, and get into the water. And then, the fear of that overwhelm and the uncontrollability of the conditions and of one's own body, right? When you don't have that sense of physical strength in the same way, much more vulnerable, on all these levels. And yet to see this son caring about his father, worrying about his father, um, and then helping him, into the ocean and letting him go right into the waves and the buoyancy of it. What a beautiful thing to witness. So powerful, right? This it's like that the fragility and the pain and the fear and the uncertainty gave this opportunity for kindness and care and generosity and reciprocity, right? Give back to someone maybe who took care of us at different times when we were vulnerable, fragile. Anyone who has spent meaningful times in a hospital or a medical facility, you can have a similar experience. You go into this other realm where it's not this world where everyone's pretending to be young and healthy and vibrant and thriving and ready to post their lives on social media. Like you go into Dana-Farber and it's like everyone is sick. There's old people and there's young people and there's all walks of life. And so it's, the the power of that, the people who have their families with them, the people who are alone, people for whom it's their first time, people who've been can't even count how many times they've been there. The weariness, the stress, the fear. And then it's like how much beauty, people being careful with one another, people understanding, people being kind, the freedom, the safety of being able to express emotion in a room full of people who totally understand, you know, nurses, doctors, staff, just like people, it's this place where people are trying to care, trying to take care of one another. How beautiful that is. What a relief for the heart that is. Yeah, sometimes very poignant that it can take that to inspire our generosity, our care, our goodness. But of course, we always see that, in every disaster and every hardship, we see this incredible outpouring, of generosity and people stretching and doing the good. Something deeper than our shared views or opinions or shared life experiences, identities, that people have this way of reaching beyond that and receiving beyond that. How beautiful the goodness of this world is. One of Leonard Cohen's later compositions is this wonderful song. You got me singing, even though the news is bad. You got me singing the only song I ever had. You got me singing ever since the river died. You got me thinking of the places we could hide. You got me singing even though the world is gone. You got me thinking that I'd like to carry on. You got me singing even though it all looks grim. You got me singing the Hallelujah hymn. You got me singing like a prisoner in a jail. You got me singing like my pardon's in the mail. You got me wishing that our little love would last. You got me thinking like those people of the past. You got me singing even though the world is gone. You got me thinking that I'd like to carry on. You got me singing even though it all went wrong. You got me singing that hallelujah song. It's like, that's it. It's not in denial of the grimness or hopelessness or despair. It's not even trying to argue with that. Right? It's like, oh, there's something worth living for. There's goodness, there's fun to be had. There's generosity and joy to participate in it. In fact, more than ever, right? Always that sense of um, if we don't protect the goodness, how can we uh, be despondent over losing it, right? How can it's like this is how you take responsibility for the generating of goodness in our lives, in our practice, and in our world. And that we see how hard that is. We see trying to sit down and just attune to care and appreciation, uh, taking joy in the joy in the world, we see everything that can come up against that, that tries to say no, that we're not worthy, or the um, one way or another, right? The way the mind doesn't feel the safety in caring. That love, that joy will provide the safety that anger will, or bitterness, or resentment, or fear. It's like that's how much we see, right, in our Q&As and our own practice, this sense of like the heart, for all kinds of reasons, will trust the security of fear, of anger, more than the security of love, compassion, joy. That is sad, very humbling, tragic. And and that, but what's the response, and what's the responsibility? Okay, dig in. Respect the resistance, as has been said. Terror, fear, the resistance can be massive. Okay, there's some waves that we don't go in the ocean with those. We know we need to pull out, we get our space, we get different perspectives on the material, we get more familiar with it in different ways, different modalities sometimes, so that it's not so evocative. And then, okay, we can come back into a relationship with it in this way. No, just care about it, note it, feel the pain, care about the pain, feel the joy of that caring, feel the equanimity that comes of accepting the truth of things. Gain, loss, pleasure, pain, joy, sorrow, things that are out of our control. And so that sense of we can take time, take responsibility, slowly, slowly, seeing how slow it is, right? Humble with the reality of what we're up against internally, externally, the massive contractions that can come, right? The massive openings, right? It's the contractions that sometimes are our doorway into understanding how important it is to connect with, care, protect, propagate, nourish the goodness, honor it, respect it. It's like, anything. Michelle and I also recently went to a bird sanctuary, the Hakalau Forest Reserve, up on the far side of Mauna Kea. And it is a beautiful attempt at preserving the habitat and ecosystem for native birds in particular. And it is this such beautiful fulfillment and expression of this trajectory, this sense of how to be in this forest of trees, and beautiful plants and uh, beautiful, amazing, oh my God, amazing beings, these birds. That sense of care and natural connection and the worthiness of that abiding, of well-wishing. And then to recognize not all is well, right? You learn this bird, the Akia Pola'au, there's only 300 left. and they're all there in this little, however many, square miles. And then it's like, and this bird, and this bird, and this bird, and this bird. All kinds of destruction, all kinds of threats, so many different levels that are just like, it starts to be incomprehensible, and it can be overwhelming, the amount of not just history that we're up against, like the web of relationships in any ecosystem that is like so complex, and one thing goes wrong and the chain of events that unfolds that threatens so much of it. And so this pain, right, this tragedy that is so clear unfolds of what led to this, what's the results, the result of past actions, some clearly intentionally harmful and some just mistakes. And that sense of like, oh my God, it's so precious. How important it is in the midst of tragedy to care for the hardship, care for the pain. And again, it's like another totally different group of volunteers and donors and, people coming to protect this place and work on this place and care for these precious beings. And you think you're there to protect the birds, but then you realize like everything is, you know, incredibly interdependent, and how supporting one place supports these other places. And then suddenly it's like the forest returns. You bring back this bird, and then suddenly there's all these plants that maybe they thought were missing and gone suddenly start to return. And so then there is this joy emerges, right? This mudita. How beautiful a thing. How beautiful many things. What a jewel of a place. What a symbol of what's possible and all the goodness. And then, yes, into the equanimity, right? The love for all beings, the pain of the sorrow, the caring for the sorrow, the caring for the pain, right? The joy that can come from that. And then this looking back, right? And just seeing existence, the joy, the sorrow, the gain, the loss, the pleasure, the pain, right? This rising and passing, and this understanding of, oh, this is the way things are, truth of things. Right there, we've led up to the truth of things and that beautiful stability of mind, right? Which is not an acceptance of everything, but it's like the platform from which to act, right? That it is through the cultivation of these beautiful qualities to their fullest degree that provides the most mature, balanced, and thorough expression of action, right? That we feel we can take healthy responsibility for our actions in the world. The more these are cultivated, how good that is. How good is the joy? How necessary it is as a part of that process. You can't get to equanimity without the others, right? And so this like appreciation of the goodness in the world, sharing in the goodness. And then it also happens on more like technical, subtle levels, right? Even through following, right? That sense of, okay, caring, metta, caring for the welfare of all beings. And then we see all beings are not well again, right? There's pain, there's suffering, there's hardship internally in our own bodies, our own minds, in our world around us, in the world beyond us. right? The arrow in the heart. And then it's like, okay, not drowning in it, caring about it, caring about the pain. And that caring, right, provides this sense of stability and of concentration, right? That part of it is the compassion itself provides um, stability, but part of it is that we're cultivating a stability of mind, right? A unity of mind, a baseline of concentration. And so even on a technical level, it's like, oh, this sense of the coming together of these mind and body, of this like, of the persistent application of caring, 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 compassion, compassion, compassion. It creates a resonance, right? A reverberation, an atmosphere, right? That we abide in. We feel it in our bodies. We receive it in the body. We receive that in our minds. And that's like a technical thing, right? The idea that piti, rapture, engrossment, right? It leads to what they say, gladdening of the mind, right? That phrase again, mudita, related to mudu and mudita, that plasticity, that softness, that tenderness, that dexterity of mind that's so necessary for the practice. That engrossment leads to a gladdening of the mind. Gladdening of the mind leads to relaxation in the body, tranquility in the body. The body that is tranquil leads to a mind that is tranquil. Mind that is tranquil leads to a mind that's concentrated. Mind that is concentrated leads to equanimity, right? You had like the 7 factors of awakening that we experience that directly in the gladdening of the heart, the gladdening of the mind, right? And that sense of mudita, that it is that trying to cultivate that gladness that causes the body to relax, the body that relaxes, helping the mind relax. The mind that is relaxed is the mind that naturally folds into concentration. That concentration leading to a deeper upekkha, equanimity, which also happens to be not just on the insight side, but on the Brahma Vihara side, right? That sense that it leads to the gladness, leading to the calm, that leads to the quiet and of the peace of acceptance. It's like an amazing design. Amazing. We think about, through our experience of these, at every step, it's like, oh wow, the fulfillment of the previous one, and it's like the fulfillment of the next. Even in our practice, it's like, okay, today this notion arising, it's like not just that we practice gladness, but that if we're practicing appreciation of pleasant and joy, and we're practicing caring for uh, pain, sorrow, suffering, and that we're practicing caring no matter what happens, then there's a way when we practice in this like integrated vipassana with the Brahma Viharas, that there is a sense of like no matter what arises, we can care for it. Oh, neutral is caring, wishing well. Something painful arises. Oh, we can feel compassion for that part of the body, for the mind that suffers from the pain. Something beautiful happens. Maybe it's because we've been applying compassion that creates beauty in the heart and mind. It creates beautiful physical sensations. Oh, then there's appreciation of that and gladness of that. So this sort of like this integration of like, oh, you might not, I'm not saying that we're able to do it all the time, but you see that it's possible, that it's like, oh, actually, right. The mind can care about pain, can care about joy, can care about neutral, that nothing that happens in the mind body sensory experience need be outside of our capacity to care for it. That's amazing. That is amazing. And any moment we feel any sense of that possibility, it's like, oh, caring for something that's painful, that is like huge. But also just appreciating something that's pleasant. Feeling the goodness of that, letting it feel good, letting it nourish us, not feeling like we have to be worried about getting attached to it. That wholesome enjoyment of that beautiful quality of mind, gladness. It's not just okay, it's necessary. It's necessary, right? We have to be able to feel that in order to deepen, 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 right? Feel like everything can be folded into this field of caring that we're cultivating. And that we are doing it, and we're doing it in ways that are hard. I mean, it can seem like to go on retreat is like a luxury, and there is incredible good fortune, incredible privilege, incredible confluence of conditions that allow for anyone to take a period of time to be able to sit quietly. 45 minutes, a weekend, a month. Absolutely. And yet there's also the sense of like how much it builds by taking responsibility. You know, people start where they can, they continue where they can. You manage life's the reality of what other responsibilities we have, but that we're cultivating these things, whether on retreat or off retreat. And this sense that like we can be the cause of our own happiness. It's amazing. And not only through joy and generosity and kind-heartedness and these things, but even through the restraint that we're cultivating, whether seated on a cushion for one sitting or for a weekend, for longer. It's a fasting, right? It's a fasting of the heart. It is a sacrifice. And it's like a beautiful sacrifice, right? It's that recognition of the joy. It's like we can take joy in those challenges and that hardship and that willingness to show up for what's hard, to be confronted with all that we're having to wrestle with and negotiate, right? The places where our hearts and minds are so conditioned towards other things. Very humbling. I was reminded about Ramadan coming up and how I fasted one year for Ramadan after the United States invaded, Afghanistan, Iraq, and there was a beautiful quote. Muhammad said, "Hunger is God's food, by which He revives the bodies of the sincere ones." Now it's a different tradition, it's a different framework, right? But that sense of like the renunciation, the precepts, the giving up of what we give up to be yogis at times, right? Of course, it's joyful to go on retreat, but it's like it's a lot. It's 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 scary. It's intimidating. There's a reason why people don't do this, right? And it's the same. It's like it's the fasting of the heart, that willingness to bear, to witness the thirst and the longing and the craving and all of the aversion and all of the stuff that gets brought up in this hour fasting, not of food and water, but of what the heart wants, right? Of speech, of outward just taking, getting everything, right? It's this middle path. of still taking care of ourselves, but seeing the places where we're restrained around our impulses, the impulses of the heart and mind, and how beautiful it is, how worthy it is, a beautiful sacrifice you can rejoice in. The Visuddhimagga, path of purification, says this about the Brahma Viharas, the end of the chapter. When the yogi has understood thus the special efficacy of each resides respectively in having beauty as the highest, etc., they should besides understand how they bring to perfection all the good states, beginning with giving. For the great beings' minds retain their balance by giving preference for beings' welfare, by dislike of beings' suffering, by desire for the various successes achieved by beings to last, and by impartiality toward all beings. And to all beings they give gifts, which are a source of pleasure, without discriminating thus. It must be given to this one, it must not be given to this one, without discriminating thus. And in order to avoid doing harm to beings, they undertake the precepts of virtue. They practice renunciation for the purpose of perfecting their virtue. They cleanse their understanding for the purpose of non-confusion about what is good and bad for beings. They constantly arouse energy, having beings' welfare and happiness at heart. When they have acquired heroic fortitude through supreme energy, they become patient with beings' many kinds of faults. They do not deceive when promising, we will give you this, we shall do this for you. They are unshakably resolute upon beings' welfare and happiness. Through unshakable loving kindness, they place them first. Through equanimity, they expect no reward. So feel good. It all starts with giving, right? And this beautiful expression of the flow of how these practices of the Brahma Viharas purify our hearts and minds, purify our actions, right, for the benefit of all. Right? That we ourselves can be responsible and take responsibility for our own happiness and as much as we can to create pleasure and joy for others and expect no reward. That will be for next weekend. For now, just the joy. Mm. Take care, everyone. Mm. Thank you for joining. For those of you who are on the Sunday sitting, take care. Hopefully, we'll see you next Sunday or come back for the equanimity weekend. And for those who are on the retreat, we'll see you in about an hour for the metta chanting and sit.